Good morning, everyone. Oh, thank you for coming to our first Wellness Week talk. We are lucky to have James Gentry from Connect Hearing. A lot of you know him from coming every other week in the Bank of Oak Ridge office to help you with your hearing aids. He has a great discussion today about hearing loss and dementia, so please give him a big River Landing welcome.
All right. Can you hear me? All right. Perfect. It's a good start. That's right. That would be tragic if it was a discussion on hearing loss and microphone's not working or something like that. So like he said, my name is James Gentry. I work out of Connect Hearing in High Point. I come here twice a month to service people that have hearing aids already. So you can find me in the Bank of Oak Ridge room Tuesday afternoons. It's normally in the newsletter. But today I wanted to discuss, start with how the ear works and kind of start with the basics of hearing and sound, and then we can kind of progress into more about hearing loss and how it affects our brains. All right? So, anatomy of our hearing or auditory system. We have two main parts. We see the outer ear here. The first part of it's very mechanical. So the sound comes through the ear. It's vibrations, goes through the ear canal, hits the eardrum. A lot of people think hearing stops at the eardrum, but that's just the first part of hearing. As the sound enters through the eardrum, it keeps going and hits three bones, the smallest bones in the body. And then your second half of the hearing process is probably one of the most important. So if this is blocked, we call that conductive hearing loss. It could be wax. It could be an eardrum that has a hole in it, perforated eardrum. There's a lot of things that maybe can cause the sound not being able to enter into the inner ear part. But the main focus that we're going to be talking about is once that sound hits the inner ear and hits the cochlea, kind of looks like a snail with all these little hair cells, and then that signal gets sent to the brain. And that's what we're going to be talking about, is the importance of the stimulation of the brain, so the electrical part of the hearing process. I'm going to hand out this. Okay. Because this has a little picture that we're going to go over.
I'm part of the hired help.
Cheap hired help. Yeah, exactly. That's my father, by the way. He's the rowdy one. If you.
Wait, I need one.
Oh, yeah.
Try to take it from me.
So a lot of this gets very technical with the terms and stuff, but as you can see, ear canal to eardrum, and then you have the three bones, incus, stapes, malleus, that do the vibrations that send the signal to the cochlea. So the cochlea is the nerve in your inner ear. That is where your hair cells get damaged. So hearing loss, for most people as we age, the hair cells start to become damaged, okay? And that's what causes hearing loss. And then you have the cochlea sending a signal through the auditory nerve. And that's what sends the signal to the brain. So the hair cells, the human body is kind of amazing. So these hair cells can recognize different types of sound. So you have, high frequency sounds. You have low frequency sounds, speech, noise. These hair cells can actually distinguish the difference between all these different types of sounds. And then, of course, the brain's job is to make sense of those sounds. And it's all done instantaneously, in milliseconds. All this happens. So you can kind of imagine as, this deteriorates, those hair cells deteriorate for whatever reason, you can kind of imagine how the brain not being stimulated can cause problems. And we'll get more into that in a little bit. So how many in here, just out of curiosity, have ever had a hearing test? I know a lot of you probably wear hearing aids already. Okay. And so, hearing's one of those things, there's no physical pain attached to it necessarily. So it kind of sneaks up on us. A lot of times as we age, we're just, people are mumbling. You speak up, you're not talking loud enough, or you're talking too fast, or, we've heard all these things before. And part of that is when something hurts in our bodies, we're quick to go get it looked at or fixed. Our back hurts, we're going to go get it looked at, or our knee hurts, or whatever it is, hip. Hearing loss does not have that physical pain attached to it. There's some emotional pain potentially and some relationship things that happen, but no physical pain. So it tends to be something that we put off. So let's talk about the hidden risks of hearing loss. And I'll give you another handout here in just a moment. Hearing loss is frustrating for everyone involved. The person, sometimes it's even more frustrating. Yep, that one right there. Yep. It's even more frustrating for family members and the people that are around the person with hearing loss. And I'll let him hand that out and then. So this is where we start to get into some of the research and some of the facts and the data associated with hearing loss. So on the first page here, you see a study, 639 adults were tracked for 12 years. This was done by Dr. Lin at Johns Hopkins, who's one of the foremost experts on hearing loss and the effects on the brain. In that study, he and his colleagues found that mild hearing loss doubled dementia risk. Just mild hearing loss. Moderate loss tripled the risk, and people with a severe hearing impairment were 5 times more likely to develop dementia. And when you think about it, again, we talked about like a muscle that you don't exercise, it goes into atrophy, gets stiff. The brain needs to be stimulated. And so the part of the brain that's stimulated by hearing starts to go into atrophy. And so it's the same type of thing as a regular muscle in your body. The brain reacts very similarly when it's not stimulated. Brain scans show us that hearing loss may contribute to a faster rate of atrophy in the brain. So that's what they've found. So mild all the way up to severe hearing loss has the potential to cause dementia. And we've got to be careful in our wording too, because it doesn't mean that because you have hearing loss, you're going to get dementia. But it's just, we're talking about percentages, and increasing your chances of getting something.
Is it reversible?
So we'll get into that. We will get into whether it's reversible. There's some studies out. They're not sure, honestly. They do think that you can retrain the brain and re-stimulate some of these areas of the brain through hearing aids. That's one way, of course. You want to amplify and stimulate that part of the brain. But it's not conclusive. A lot of times when it comes to memory issues, all of your medications, anything you're doing with memory loss, dementia, you're just trying to slow it down. You're not necessarily curing it or correcting it. So the other thing about hearing, it's not just, I can't hear my wife or my husband or my grandkids. The inner ear is responsible for balance as well. So when you're walking, your inner ear has the semicircular canals and this fluid. So there's a lot of risk of falling associated with hearing loss as well. Just kind of being less aware of your surroundings. There are some myths that kind of hold people back when it comes to hearing aids in general. And I don't want to spend a ton of time on hearing aids specifically, but I know a lot of you wear hearing aids or know someone that maybe is thinking about doing something as far as hearing aids are concerned. Can hearing aids reduce these risks that we've just talked about? So the studies have never really concluded whether hearing aids can prevent these things. But what they have concluded is you're definitely not going to get any detriment by wearing hearing aids. It can only help you. So whether you're looking at, improvement of relationships with family and friends, the stimulation of the brain that we've talked about, the atrophy of the brain, hearing aids are going to help you. And then, so this says 27 million Americans age 50 and older have hearing loss. 50 and older, 27 million. Only 1 in 7 use a hearing aid. Why is that? Could be cost. It could be, a neighbor down the street that keeps them in the drawer more than they have them in their ears. It could be a stigma of, I'm not old enough for hearing aids. So there's a lot of things associated with that, but that's really eye-opening. Only 1 in 7 use a hearing aid. And so my thing is, for me, yes, I program hearing aids. That is what I do. But it is very important, especially if you've never been tested before, to at least get a baseline hearing test. Hearing aid users wait on average 10 years before getting help for their hearing loss. So once you've gotten that initial test, you know that, okay, I have a problem, I'm just not ready yet, And so 10 years on average. Now, some people, in my experience in the office, I have some that come in, get tested for the first time, and they're ready to do something. They're just, if I have an issue, I'm going to address it. There are others that are, need to wait it out. But my goal here today is to just talk about some of the risks that you're taking. If you do, well, I'm going to put it off. It's not that important yet. I got other things that are more important to me versus, hearing. So again, not saying hearing loss causes dementia, but you are more likely to get memory issues, not just dementia, Alzheimer's or whatever it is, if you have untreated hearing loss. And that's the key, untreated. Wearing hearing aids means I'm old. I'm not ready for that. It's normal to feel worried, that hearing loss, means that you're aging. There's a lot of things that change in your body as you age. I'm almost 40, and I'm not the same as I was when I was 20. So I know things change as we age. But the thing about hearing loss is it doesn't just affect people over the age of 50. Kids are born with hearing loss. I have patients that have worn hearing aids since they were 3 and 4 years old. Their whole life they've worn hearing aids. So trying to get rid of that stigma of hearing aids means I'm old. Because there are all ages of people that wear hearing aids and have hearing loss. I don't like the way hearing aids look. The old days of big clunky pocket aids and big things behind your ear are a thing of the past. Hearing aids now are discreet. A lot of times, many of you probably have friends you don't even know are wearing hearing aids. And they've had them for a year or two before you realize, oh, you've had hearing aids? How long have you had hearing aids? Oh, I've worn them for 2-3 years. My thing is always hearing loss is just as, if not more noticeable than a hearing aid. The whats, the misunderstanding, what someone said, and I've got some comics we're going to look at here in a minute about hearing loss, just because they're pretty funny. Hearing aids cost too much. That's a legitimate, worry for a lot of people, the cost. And once you start down the hearing aid journey, it's not like you can just buy one set and you're set for the rest of your life. It's a constant thing where you're having to service them, and so that is very few health insurances cover. But all of these are, things that people are scared about that maybe hold people back from doing something. But again, the main focus that we want to look at when it comes to hearing loss is what are the issues with untreated hearing loss. And again, we're talking, it's easy to get wax removed. It's easy maybe if you have a hole in your eardrum to get the surgery and get it repaired. But the main thing is the electrical part of it, the second part of it, the stimulation of the brain. A lot of that is more serious, honestly, because we're talking about the central part of your whole body. Let me pass out some just for a little bit of comedy, and then we'll get into some more brain stuff. Here's the comics. So I've starred a few of these on these pages.
Are any of these ones that I cut out and gave you?
Could be. you do like comics.
No. I'm in source for comics.
So you'll be familiar probably with a lot of these comic strips if you like comics. A lot of Pickles, a lot of Dennis the Menace, yeah. So on the first page, I thought you broke it off with Gerald. Well, I have 6 times, just never when he's had his hearing aid in. Little miscommunication there. And then this one, this is, oh, for Pete's sake. What is it? I decided to do my vacuuming before I put in my hearing aids this morning. Well, what's wrong with that? Well, I vacuumed the whole house, and then I realized I never turned the vacuum on. So, a little wasted energy. And then Pickles again, what are you looking for, Earl? And Earl says, my teeth. She says, well, you can borrow mine until you find yours. What? I just said you could borrow my keys. I didn't say I lost my keys. I said I lost my teeth. Well, then forget it. And then the Dennis the Menace one on the bottom. What are you looking at, Nelson? Grandma said you have earlids. She says that's how you can shut your ears just like you shut your eyes. Your grandma should grow herself a mouth lid. And then on that back page, that's just if there's one phrase that I hear more than any other when people come for a hearing test or to look into hearing aids, it's the selective hearing. I have selective hearing, or my wife or husband has selective hearing. And a lot of times that's used, to be funny, or it's used as kind of an out when people are struggling to admit that they do have a hearing issue. Okay, so understanding auditory deprivation. So auditory deprivation is just what it sounds like. You're depriving the brain of information. So very often people aren't aware of hearing loss. We kind of talked about that. It occurs slowly over a matter of years. The signs are very subtle, but you keep turning your TV up just a little bit. Or you notice that huh or what becomes a big part of your vocabulary. And like I say, people wait 10 years to actually get the hearing aid, to look into hearing aids. Why is that? Well, there's no physical pain attached to it, like we talked about. So what is auditory deprivation? That occurs when your brain is literally deprived of sound, okay? Untreated hearing loss is a big component of that. So just because the brain receives the sound doesn't mean that it can make sense of the sound. So we can receive sound. So people probably that wear hearing aids and still might struggle a little bit with understanding words. Well, why is that? Well, it could have been that they waited 15 to 20 years to get help. Just because we're getting the sound to the brain doesn't mean that the brain is able to make sense of that sound. So that is what auditory deprivation does. Another reason that it's important to do something as soon as possible when it comes to you find out you have hearing loss, you're having these issues. It's another way the brain goes into atrophy. And then that cortex part of the brain is unable to make sense of the sound. So you go from someone speaking to you, even with hearing aids, being able to understand 90 to 100% of what they say, and even with help, you might only be at 50 or 60. Versus without hearing aids, you might be at 0. But that's what auditory deprivation is. It's a atrophy of that part of the brain, and you're depriving the brain of the sound. And so it's kind of like, again, a muscle that's not being exercised. So hearing is a brain activity where your ears are just a mechanism to receive the sound, but you hear with your brain. So a lot of times we think, hearing happens in the ear. Well, that's where it starts. But hearing is really a brain activity. Hearing loss causes sensory deprivation. Your brain needs that stimulation to stay sharp. So even mild hearing loss understimulates the brain. And the use it or lose it. We've heard that before. You use something or you're going to lose it. Well, hearing loss left untreated, auditory pathways atrophy because they're not being used, and you can lose that ability. So what can you do? Well, obviously, hearing aids are a good way to help with this. It's not the only solution, but when there's nerve damage or sensory neural hearing loss, no real surgery or anything is going to help with that. So there are cochlear implants available for people who have really severe to profound loss. But when the nerves are damaged, there's no surgery where you can go in there and fix the nerves. You just have to amplify and stimulate that whole system. Any questions on any of that? Any part of what we've gone over so far? Yes?
Is anybody doing research on that type of surgery to see if they can help, or has that been going on?
Yeah, Dr. Lynn at Johns Hopkins, like I say, he's probably the forefront of all this. They're always looking at, most of the research is going into implants. Can we improve on cochlear implants? The main issue with implants is they will only do cochlear implants for people who have severe to profound loss. So they're very reluctant to do implants on anyone with mild to moderate hearing loss. And the reason for that is the current way they do implants, they scrape your cochlea and kill all your natural hearing. And so you're totally dependent on that implant. So yes, they're definitely looking for ways to make maybe implant surgery not so drastic. And maybe that's an option, because one advantage of implants is a lot of times insurance will cover the implant surgery, Medicare and then a supplemental insurance. So even though it's a drastic fix, but yes, they're researching it. And Johns Hopkins, Dr. Lynn's probably the one doing the most on this whole topic.
Thank you.
Yep. Anyone else? Yes?
Will you be talking about tinnitus?
I hadn't planned on it. I can answer some questions on tinnitus if you want me
I
to.
was just wondering if that often is the beginning of, or
It can be, yeah. So tinnitus, for most people, is a high-pitched ringing sound. But it can be in the form of a whooshing sound. It can be chirping. Some people describe it sounds like a train is outside their window, that type of thing. Yes, mild tinnitus is a precursor and a lot of times a symptom of hearing loss. That's another thing. There's not a lot of cures out there for tinnitus. Hearing aids can help mask it and diminish it, but as far as curing it, they're working on it, but it's, I would just, a word of advice, I'd stay away from drops, you see advertised on TV, or, these drops, miracle drops you put in your ear, they're gonna cure your tinnitus. Stay away from anything like that. I mean, it is an inner ear brain issue, and drops are not gonna cure your tinnitus. Yeah. Anyone else? So the one thing about the brain in particular, it's very flexible and can make a lot of changes quickly. But something like a muscle going into atrophy, you think about it, it takes time to rework and rehab that muscle. Same thing, a lot of times people want instant results with hearing aids, and that's understandable. You just paid thousands of dollars for something and you want it to work now. But for someone who has waited 10, 15, 20 years to get help, it might not be an instantaneous thing. And that's why it's important to go, to work with your provider. The follow-ups are just as important as that initial visit. Adjustments, wearing the hearing aids all day, not just wearing them when you go out to dinner and then putting them back in the drawer when you're home alone, just watching TV, or maybe you're not talking to anyone actively. It's important to wear them as much as possible because of that process. Retraining your brain to hear these sounds, and it's stimulating that part of the brain. Another thing, a lot of times, 2 hearing aids versus 1. Can I just get 1? Well, you can. 1's better than nothing, but 2's better than 1. And of course, we're talking about someone who has hearing loss in both ears. There are times where an ear is unaidable or has normal hearing, but that's rare. So 2 aids, you think about the brain needs that sound from both sides. And it's across, so left ear goes to the right side of the brain and right ear goes to the left side of the brain. So, why would you just want to stimulate one side of your brain? So, and same thing with vision, why would you just want to get one bifocal and just leave the other eye, the way it is? So, all right, I have one more handout, and then we'll take any more questions. And then I have a couple of, you can obviously take the handouts with you, and then I have a couple more things for you as well. Let's do this. This is the actual hearing loss and dementia. Senior moments. We've all probably had those. I've had those at 39 years old. You see here, it says, when my mother hit midlife, she sometimes called me Luna. Well, that was the name of the childhood cat. Now that I'm the age she was, I'm often looking for my glasses, and they're on top of my head.
Been there.
Yep. Senior moments frighten me, and they can be scary. Anytime you start talking about, and you probably all know someone, maybe very personally, or someone that, friend, neighbor, that either is starting the effects of dementia or is going through, I had 2 grandmothers that had dementia. And so it can hit home for a lot of people. And so anytime we start talking about losing our memory and dementia and Alzheimer's, it's scary for a lot of people, for most people. So to be clear, hearing loss at the very least puts you at increased risk of cognitive impairment as you get older. So you see here what the research shows. This kind of sums up the research. Dementia is more common among people with untreated hearing loss. People with untreated hearing loss tend to develop cognitive decline earlier than people with normal hearing. And people with untreated hearing loss report more concerns about their memory than people with normal hearing. So again, it's not a matter of, I don't want people to take away that hearing loss causes these things. It's not a causal thing, but it increases your risks. So we just want to be proactive. Researchers, and it says right here, researchers are not sure if hearing aids can prevent or reverse cognitive decline. That's what you asked earlier. There's some research being done on it, but again, it is very clear that you're not hurting yourself by wearing hearing aids. It can only help you. It will not hurt you. So you're increasing your risk of maybe putting off some cognitive decline or not getting the auditory deprivation that we talked about. Don't assume that you're suffering from dementia if you're having trouble understanding speech or find it exhausting to have simple conversations. I have my own notes, but it's page 3.
It's page 3 of 7 is what it says. Page 3 of
Yes, ma'am, yeah. So a lot of people, I don't want, just because you're having trouble with conversations or listening to people, attention issues, that doesn't mean that you have dementia. It's vital, though. I mean, most of you, I think, raised your hand saying that you've had at least one hearing test. And as you should. I mean, like I say, anytime you reach 50, it's recommended based on the results of the test to get it done, to establish a baseline. And then every 3 years, if you're normal at 50, but if you have hearing loss, you should probably get it done more often than every 3 years. I don't necessarily say annually, but in my office, we typically do it every couple years, unless someone notices a change, and then we'll do an updated hearing test. So a recent study published in July of last year found that people who struggle to hear speech and noise were more likely to develop dementia than those with normal hearing. So that was an 11-year period. So specifically, people who struggled with speech and noise. And again, it wasn't capable of determining, hearing loss causing this, but there's a correlation there. They're linked. Johns Hopkins again, like I say, they probably do some of the most research on this topic. They looked at cognitive impairment scores over 6 years for 2,000 seniors. Those with hearing loss had a faster decline. So 2,000 seniors, if you had hearing loss, there was a faster decline in your ability to cognitively understand and or speak. Just general cognitive impairment. And they were all normal cognitively when the research began. So over that 11 years, there was some decline. People with hearing loss, 24% more likely to meet the standard of cognitive impairment compared to people with normal hearing. Another study, 10,000 men aged 62 and up over 8 years. The greater the hearing loss, the more likely men were to express concerns about their memory or thinking over time. With even a mild hearing loss, their chance of reporting cognitive decline was 30% higher than among those who did not report any hearing loss. And then the percentage goes up with moderate or severe hearing loss. And that was done by Dr. Sharon Curran at Brigham and Women's Hospital. And then the last study here, Salt Lake City team found 4,500 seniors without dementia. 16.3% of those with hearing loss developed dementia compared to only 12% of those with normal hearing. It tended to occur faster in people with hearing loss. So, see, it's a gradual thing. It took over a decade for the people with hearing loss to develop dementia. And think about that decade time frame, and then how long do people wait before they do something about their hearing loss? 10 years on average. So they're right there at that cutoff. And so here's a little thing about tinnitus, and Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's is slightly more common among people who have tinnitus. That is probably directly related to people with tinnitus also have hearing loss typically. So that's probably more of a correlation with the hearing loss versus the tinnitus. Do hearing aids reverse cognitive decline? Going back to what you asked earlier. There was no clear answer to this question. Those with severe hearing loss who wore hearing aids had a slightly lower risk of subsequent cognitive decline, but the effect was too small to be statistically significant. But what they did say is you're never going to hurt yourself by wearing hearing aids if you have hearing loss. It can only help you. So basically, if we're summing this up, hearing loss going untreated can increase your risk of any sort of cognitive impairment or memory issues, whether that's dementia, Alzheimer's, auditory deprivation. So my advice would be, I know a lot of you already wear hearing aids, continue doing that, please. Be consistent in wearing them daily, all day, as much as you can, even if it's a little bit of a chore, putting them in. Some people struggle with putting them in, whatever that may be. Stay up to date with your provider and go regularly for visits. And then if you don't wear hearing aids currently and you've been tested, if it's been over a year or two, go get tested again. That way that can be tracked. We do speech scores as well. So we're not just tracking how well you hear tones, we're checking your speech ability as well. That's that auditory processing deprivation we talked about. That's all tracked. So that would be my advice. If you currently wear hearing aids, keep doing it. If you currently do not, and you've been tested and you had normal hearing, great, stay on top of it. But if you had hearing loss, go get tested again and seriously consider your options when it comes to amplifying and wearing hearing aids. Any questions? Yes.
There are such a big difference in price tags
Yes.
from one to another.
Yes.
Does that relate to the quality?
Yeah, so pricing of hearing aids, this is the best way to think about pricing of hearing aids. It's not what they look like. It's not how big or small they are. It is how advanced that computer is inside the hearing aid. And so the easiest way to think about it is, comparing apples to apples, the more that hearing aid reduces background noise, the more expensive the hearing aid is going to be. So I typically do a lifestyle assessment on someone. It's not so much your hearing loss, it's your lifestyle. Someone who sits at home and watches TV and they're widowed or a widower, they don't need as advanced of a hearing aid as someone who's still very active. You're in social settings, you're eating out, you're going to social events, because there's typically more noise. So that's really what determines pricing of hearing aids, is how well does that hearing aid do in noise. It's a computer chip, and so how advanced that computer is. Yes?
Should you always take your hearing aids out when you're playing sports and sweating?
It depends on the hearing aid. You don't have to. Most hearing aids now are very water resistant, and we actually have waterproof hearing aids now. So that's something more recent. We have waterproof hearing aids, but it's up to you. The more you expose hearing aids to the elements, moisture, perspiration, the quicker they're gonna, maybe get some sort of issues. But hearing aids are very water resistant. And again, my thing is I want you wearing them as much as you can. And you're more likely to lose them if you have to pull them off, do something, and then put them back in. Yeah. So, any other questions? Yes.
This might be a little bit touchy, but so without naming the store, people who offer significantly discounted hearing aids,
Mm-hmm.
and yet it looks like the same brand that you're looking at in an audiologist's office. Would you say that they've probably been modified so that they are not doing as much background noise reduction?
They have been modified. So it's not the full chip. So, big box stores, we all know, Costco's different than Sam's, I will say that, but both of them have some sort of modified hearing aid. Yes, you're saving a lot of money, and that is very attractive to a lot of people, but you are not getting the full chip. It is the whole kind of get what you pay for. But again, I never discourage someone from getting help, again, because of what we've talked about. Getting help is better than doing nothing. But yes, it is a modified chip. Yes?
Can you adjust any type of hearing aid?
I can. Yep, so Tuesday afternoons, twice a month, I bring a laptop and I have software to adjust almost any brand. Yeah, so look in the newsletter. I'll be here again May 10th, that Tuesday afternoon. On the back of one of these, but it's always in the newsletter, but on I think the second one, on the very last page, yes, my name and phone number to the office is on there. On the second, it's the hidden risk of hearing loss. And so you can call. Kelly answers the phone. She's the one that runs the office. Basically, she does everything for the office. But yes, I can adjust Widex, Phonak, Oticon, GN Resound, Starkey. It doesn't matter the brand, even if you didn't get them from us. Yeah, make an appointment. I typically start at 1:30, and I'll stay until, sometimes I see 4 people, sometimes I see 8 in about 15-minute increments, yes.
Is there a charge?
So the first time I see you, I typically don't charge. I'll offer that as a free service to you. If you become a frequent flyer, I call them. If you haven't purchased from us, now people that purchased at my clinic, we don't charge. But if you haven't, I'll do a free service that first time. Yeah. And I'll do a cleaning and all that for you as well. I'm in the Bank of Oak Ridge room, so we've got a nice private little room in the main building.
You do check for earwax, right?
Yes.
You
So
don't remove it, but you do check.
yeah, we can do earwax removals as long as it's not impacted way down at the eardrum. So if it's just a little bit like right at the entryway, we can do that. I just don't want to get involved in, because people on blood thinners and the earwax is up against the eardrum. I'll leave that for the ENT. Ear, nose, and throat doctor. Yeah. I'll leave that for them. Yeah. But yeah, if you wanted to come, like I say, we won't charge for that initial appointment. I know a lot of you, it's just convenient not having to go to an office. I'm here twice a month, and a lot of people don't have, it's hard to get transportation, whatever it is, so we offer that as a service. Anything else? All right. Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, we just want to say thank you so much
Yeah.
for coming and providing the service to our residents every month. We have a little goodie
thank
bag
you.
for you, and you'll probably be around for a couple minutes.
Yes,
if
I'll
anybody
stick
has any
around. Yeah.
questions.
Yeah.
All right, and then at 2 o'clock, we have a speaker coming to talk about pelvic health. That'll be in here. And then tonight, from 6 to 8, we've got shag dancers. We have a DJ.
That sounds like fun.
Go eat, and then come here. We have banana pudding, so you can have dessert here. And then we're going to dance the night away. Oh, come on back. Perfect. And Jill just said at 3:30, at 3 o'clock, from 3 to 3:30, she's going to do